Hello everyone, this is RaySpace here to review the details of my Kasei rocket line in Kerbal Space Program 1.12 with real solar system. And I'm doing this because I intend to use it quite a lot and want to review all the details and all the logic that went in behind it so that when I do use it, people will be on the same page. So the Kasei rocket line, Kasei means Mars in Japanese. And basically it was meant to be an alternative to the Ares 5, Ares meaning Mars in Greek. Well, it's sort of different because in the case of Kasei, it's after the planet Mars, whereas Ares would be the Greek equivalent to the god Mars. The Romans associated Mars with Ares is the way it went. So it's a little bit different, but still. That is where it gets its name. It is Mars. It's still a Mars rocket, if you will. But the logic is different from Ares. Ares was sort of trying to split the difference between being a low Earth orbit rocket and being a lunar rocket. SLS is a pure lunar rocket. It's really not good for bringing things to low Earth orbit. But Ares 5, with its more powerful upper stage engine, was trying to also do low Earth orbit, but it wasn't highly optimized for the moon or for Mars the way that SLS is for high orbits, because SLS basically has the ideal engines on both stages. The RS-25s are unmatched and the RL-10s are as efficient as it gets, and they're fairly light. They are not very powerful, but then you don't need to be very powerful if you're just going to other planets. So it all works out. This is not splitting the difference. This is meant to be a low Earth orbit rocket. And the logic behind it is that if you have two hydrogen-oxygen stages, and they both contribute relatively evenly. I mean, of course, because the first stage is starting off with the sea level ISP, it should get less, and it does get less than the upper stage, which is going to be vacuum all the way and therefore more efficient. So we lean on it a little bit more. But the point is, if you split it up like that, you get basically the amount of delta V you need to get to orbit. Understanding that, I decided to make a two-stage rocket like that. And then to help it out to higher orbits, we have two options. We can put on a third stage, of course, or I can put on boosters to try and turn this more like an SLS thing. But the trick here is that this doesn't have that kind of burn time. Because it is a low Earth orbit rocket, it has enough thrust to lift off with just these 5 engines here. And these 5 engines are the ED9 engines. They are 4,000 kilonewtons, 385 seconds ISP, 434 in vacuum, stage combustion engines. They do throttle, which does allow me to land the booster. That's why it has the grid fins, and I've done a video where I landed it on the drone ship, but it's not consistent. And then on the second stage, we have just one of those engines, just one of those engines in a vacuum form with a vacuum nozzle. So that's how it works, and so this gets much more ISP, still not as much as an RL-10, 456 seconds, a little bit more thrust, and a lot more mass. It does not have, recently Blue Origin mentioned that the New Glenn BE3Us have a thrust-weight ratio of 90, which is very high for a Hydrolox engine. This does not have 90. This is less than that. So yeah, we do not have that kind of thrust-weight ratio on here. So that's right. That is as it should be. I've tried to make this as reasonable as possible so that it can be made. The diameter of the rocket is 8.4 meters, the same as SLS and the same as the Ares 5, at least one variant of it. And it is just the same diameter the whole way. Since it has so much thrust on the second stage, this is a very large stage. Its propellant mass is 304.6 tons. That helps us out if we are going to have boosters or do other things with it. But yeah, it's very powerful, and the thrust-weight ratio when we get to the second stage starts out at 1. However, I did make it so that neither stage exceeds a thrust-weight ratio of 4, and of course both stages do have the ability to throttle down as necessary as well. Here we have an 85-ton mass, and that's the mass I tested with in order to bring the booster back down. So that is fine if we're going to get the booster to a drone ship. Without trying to recover the booster, it can do 95 tons to low Earth orbit. But along the way, there was another variant of this, and I will show you that. Before I decided to bring the booster to a drone ship, I turned it into an airplane. And so we have this version with wings, and has 3 Methalox boosters on the top here. These are my Sagitta boosters. They each have 5 1,000 kilonewton engines. They were used for a different rocket, the Sagitta rocket, and that rocket shared tankage with the Shinkansen spaceplane, and also shared the engines. So the engines were used for the Sagitta rocket, the Shinkansen spaceplane, and this. And so that was the sort of logic. So each of these has 5,000 kilonewtons, each booster I mean, and the tonnage is about 218 tons of propellant, methane and oxygen. So that's on top, and then we have the first stage landing in the Bahamas, not on a drone ship, but this had a very unique fairing arrangement where the fairing retracts. So the fairing sort of, after the separation of the second stage and the payload, retracts, and then this can fly. So that's how that works. And then we have the same second stage, and then whatever payload we have. In this case, it was carrying a complicated payload, this partly completing the trip to the moon, and then we have the lander, which is sort of in a weird situation because I had to fit it inside the fairing. So it needs to separate and then dock with its drop tanks before trying to land. So that's a little bit inconvenient there, but that is this Kasei 3. The Kasei can take up to 5 Sagitta boosters. I don't know if I can get this back on. Oh, maybe. Anyway, not critical, but yeah, it's an interesting fairing. It's sort of its animation is not that quick, really. I've done something wrong. I've shifted it wrong so that it's bulging out there. But anyway, the fairing actually in its animation retracts a bit, lets the second stage go, and then closes. And so there are videos where that happens. Unfortunately, the balance of this has been a little bit tricky with the wing surfaces and all that. And I'll have to continue working on that. It's actually sharing wings with the Orion 3 carrier plane, which is another one of my things. But we're not going to talk about that this time. But yeah, it's using the exact same wing. That one also comes down suborbitally and lands in the Bahamas, so I guess it was sort of logical. The mass of this is not that different from the Orion carrier plane, so using the same wing was quite reasonable. Anyway, so that's the winged one, but that's basically obsolete. We're going to be doing the drone ship option and sticking with that. Now, aside from just slapping on the Sagitta boosters to the Kasei rocket, there was also the Kasei 2. So this is how this is set up, but the Kasei 2 is a larger version of the Kasei rocket. It's 10.1 meters in diameter, that to match the Saturn V rocket, both its first and second stages. And it has 9 of the ED9 engines at the bottom, so same engines, just 9 of them, and then it has still 1 engine on the upper stage. Now the thrust-weight ratio is much lower, 0.59 when it starts up, so it struggles a little bit more to get to orbit, but it still can carry up to 180 tons potentially. Closing the gap, the Kasei 1 rocket is capable with 5 boosters of getting 150 tons. So it goes from 95 tons with just core alone to, with every additional booster adding to that, up to 150 tons. And then this one takes over at 180 tons total. And it still weighs in less than the SLS because the SLS has solid rocket boosters. So we're at less than 2,500 tons. Saturn V was 3,000 tons and could carry 140 tons to low Earth orbit. But of course, it was using kerosene and oxygen, and that was most of its tonnage. And that wasn't as efficient, and the F1 engines were not exactly the most efficient. possible Kerolox engines anyway, we've got a lot more working for us here. So there's a straight up hydrogen oxygen rocket, and it gets that 180, which is superb, of course, though we really need a very optimized launch script for this. With sort of a less optimized situation, I would say that we would get 160. So that is the straight up Kasei 2 rocket. And then I have introduced the Kasei Heavy, but technically I was never intending on using that, but it became an expedient thing in my Mars base construction. The Kasei Heavy is capable of up to 450 tons to low Earth orbit, and it has 3 cores of the Kasei rocket there. And the center core, it has just 5 engines then, not 9. So it lasts longer like that. And then it just operates like that. With the 450 tons, the upper stage is even more burdened. You can see 0.43, but it all works out in the end, and we recently tested that in a video. So that's really the one I don't want to use, but still it's only a little bit heavier than Starship Super Heavy, so there is that. I've never tested any sort of recoverability with the Kasei 2. Well, maybe I accidentally slapped wings on it at one point, but anyway, recoverability is not currently available for the Kasei 2, whether it's the core alone or with these boosters or anything. That has not been successful. So yeah, that is the Kasei line of rockets. It's very simple, you know. There's not a whole lot to it. It's just a matter of the math being really good for this kind of rocket. As long as you can handle the hydrolox, it just works, as a more famous person than me once said, probably a little bit more controversially. So anyway, that is the Kasei line of rockets, and I do intend to continue using them. And recently Pekka offered a booster for it. Here we go. These are the boosters Pekka made recently, and there's some heat shielding there, but let me show off the engines that Pekka made. These are just Methalox boosters, Methalox engines, and they're very powerful Methalox engines. They are coming in at 6,600 kilonewtons, it looks like here. Very efficient, well, for sea level engines, very efficient. Thrust weight ratio of 100, so that's modest in a way. And these boosters are larger, of course, than the Sagitta boosters. They come in about 300 tons, whereas the Sagitta boosters were more like 220. So these give more of a boost then. And with 2 boosters, it gets 120 tons to, or was it more than that? I forget. 140 tons, sorry. I think we got 140 tons to low Earth orbit with it. So yeah, that's a healthy boost. And if I wanted to put 4 boosters on it, they would probably be up to the Kasei 2 level. So that's another option. But I look forward to putting these boosters to more nefarious purposes than even Pekka envisioned. And we'll have that in a different video. So anyway, that's the Kasei rocket line. I don't know if I'll really use these boosters in place of my Sagitta boosters, but we'll see. So with that, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please do press like. If you have any comments or suggestions, please leave them in the comment section below, and I'll see you next time.